Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. Around August 2022, my buddy Alex did something foolish. He purchased a brand new car he couldn't afford. His insurance was like $450 a month, and he made just $12 an hour working as a shift lead at Burger King. His car payment was a whopping $875 per month. At $12 an hour, working 30 hours a week, Alex's weekly income was roughly $360, or about $1,500 a month. So yeah, the numbers didn't add up. Alex turned to me for help since I used to work in car sales and knew the industry well. I reviewed his paperwork, and while the dealer did rip him off, none of it was illegal. They just overcharged for warranties, gave him a high APR, and piled on add-ons. But to get Alex out of this mess, I needed to find something illegal. Examining his finance application, which correctly listed his income, I had an idea. No bank would approve an $875 car payment for someone making $1,500 a month. It made no mathematical sense. So I searched for the finance app the dealer submitted to the bank. Dealers often reproduce handwritten applications electronically. But on the app the dealer sent the bank, they claimed Alex was a general manager at Burger King, earning $80,000 a year. With Alex's good credit, the bank probably didn't ask for proof of income. So I took Alex to the dealership and told the sales manager we'd need to speak to the general manager about unwinding Alex's deal and returning his trade-in. They thought I was joking. Then I showed them how their finance department had committed bank fraud. I presented Alex's original app listing his real $14K income and the dealer's app claiming $80K. That's a felony, I reminded them. Let's keep this simple. The GM realized they were in deep trouble with my solid proof. He asked, "So what can I do to make this right?" "Unwind the deal and give Alex his trade-in back," I said. The GM tried to avoid that, but I stood firm, threatening to turn his life into a living hell with the evidence. Alex also needed a car for work the next day. The GM said they'd already sold Alex's trade-in but offered a 2007 Focus with more miles instead. I refused, insisting the replacement be as good or better than the trade-in. "I'm giving him a free car," the GM protested. "No, you took his trade-in and sold it. You committed a felony. This isn't free. You're correcting your mistake," I countered. When the GM still resisted, I threatened legal action. Alex didn't want that route, but it was our plan B. Finally, the GM offered an 08 Civic with slightly more miles but in better condition than the trade-in. We accepted. They unwound the new car loan, took back the new car, now used, and gave Alex the Civic at no extra cost. We could have involved lawyers from the start, but court takes forever. This was a faster fix. The next one is an entitled people story. For as long as I can remember, my family has owned a nice little plot of land just outside the city. It's nothing too fancy, just a few acres that my grandparents purchased years ago. They built a small cottage on the property that we would visit during the summers. Those were some of my favorite childhood memories, spending weekends at the cottage, swimming in the nearby creek, and exploring the surrounding woods. When my grandparents passed away, they left the land to my parents. By then, the cottage was getting pretty run down, so my parents decided to tear it down and build a new house. It took them a couple of years to save up enough money, but when I was in high school, they finally broke ground on the new place. It was built just in time for me to move into when I started college nearby. Living rent-free while getting my degree was an awesome setup. The house was just the right size for me and a couple roommates, and we took advantage of the surrounding land for parties and bonfires. After graduation, my roommates moved on and I decided to stay in the house by myself. My job was close by, so it just made sense. Plus, I liked having the peace and quiet of the country after dealing with loud college roommates for 4 years. Everything was going great until a new family bought the property next door, which had been vacant for a while. I was excited to finally have some neighbors again. I walked over to introduce myself and bring them some homemade bread that my mom had sent over. When a woman who looked to be in her 40s answered the door, I smiled and waved. "Hi there, I'm your new neighbor. Just wanted to stop by and introduce myself. I'm Mike." She looked at me with an expression that can only be described as disgust. "Oh, great, a hick neighbor with pitiful baking skills," she sneered, not even making eye contact with me. I was so taken aback by her rude response that I didn't even know how to react. IT quote S just some bread my mom made," I stammered. "Listen, I don't have time for this country bumpkin nonsense," she snapped. "My name is Karen, and I expect some peace and quiet around here, so keep your distance." And with that, she slammed the door in my face. I walked back home in stunned silence, her cruel words ringing in my ears. Unfortunately, that encounter set the tone for the rest of our neighborly relationship. The next weekend, I was using my riding lawnmower to cut the grass. As I made a turn near the property line, I suddenly heard, "Cut that racket off." I looked over to see Karen glaring at me from her porch. "It's the middle of the afternoon," I called back. "Just doing some yard work." "I don't care what time it is," Karen yelled. "The noise from that thing is unacceptable. I'm trying to relax over here." I shook my head in disbelief, but decided to just finish up quickly to avoid any more conflict. Sadly, nothing I did seemed to please her. If I was outside doing yard work, I was making too much noise. When my car was parked too close to the property line, she accused me of trespassing. She even called the cops on me one night when I had a small bonfire with some friends. The police came and confirmed that recreational fires were perfectly legal, but Karen kept insisting we were disturbing the peace. Things escalated when I came home from work one day to find wooden stakes with string tied between them placed along the property line. Perplexed, I walked over to Karen's house. She opened the door holding a book called Property Law Rights and looking ready for battle. "Karen, did you put those stakes up?" I asked calmly. "Yes, I'm establishing the property boundary," she declared. "You consistently invade my yard space and I won't stand for it any longer." I took a deep breath, trying to hold my tongue. "The property line is clearly marked by the tree line. Those stakes you put up are almost 10 feet into my yard." Karen thrust her book towards me, jabbing her finger at a page. "According to this, I'm entitled to any unutilized land adjacent to my property if I make productive use of it. You don't use that space, so I'm claiming it." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Listen, that's not how property law works at all," I explained. "Just take the stakes down so we can move past this." Karen crossed her arms defiantly. "Absolutely not. I know my rights." Arguing with her was clearly pointless. I decided to just remove the stakes myself later. Big mistake. The next day, I was greeted by the sight of my car with 2 flat tires and a nasty note from Karen about staying off her land. Enough was enough. I decided to fight back the legal way. My buddy Steve was in law school and helped me draft a formal letter to Karen stating that she was encroaching on my land, and if she didn't remove the stakes herself, I would file a lawsuit for property damages. A week went by with no response. Then one day I heard the familiar rumble of heavy machinery. I raced outside to see a bulldozer plowing away in my backyard dangerously close to the tree line. Karen stood nearby shouting instructions. I ran over screaming at her to stop. The driver didn't know what to do. Karen was insisting that this was her land now, while I waved the property deed in her face, proving otherwise. The police were called once again, and this time I pressed charges for destruction of property and attempted theft of land. In court, Karen represented herself and tried to argue adverse possession rights, but she didn't have a legal leg to stand on. Not only did she have zero claim to my property, but she admitted to damaging my car on purpose. The judge fully ruled in my favor, ordering Karen to pay $100,000 in damages, not just for the car incident, but for the emotional stress she had caused me. Her little stunt ended up costing her big time. Karen was absolutely livid at the court's decision. As the bailiff dragged her away, she screamed about how I was a lying cheat who manipulated the legal system. I didn't gloat or sink to her level. For me, the ruling meant I had taken back control and could live in peace again. Justice had been served. Karen learned the hard way that you can't just steal someone's land and get away with it. Her greed and disregard for decency cost her $100 grand. I have to admit, seeing her smug entitlement backfire so spectacularly felt pretty damn satisfying. In the end, Karen and her family moved away just a few months later. I heard through the grapevine that she had trouble finding a new place because no one wanted such a wretched, litigious neighbor. As for me, the house and land are as peaceful and enjoyable as ever. I finally have good neighbors who I share food from my mom's garden and take turns mowing the areas near our shared property line. No more entitled Karens allowed. The next one is a petty revenge story. The backstory: here in Sweden, there is a huge difference in house prices between popular areas and major cities compared to the countryside. This meant that I was able to buy a small fixer-upper house at the age of 23, 4 years ago, on a very average income. There was only me and one other bidder involved, and I eventually won the bidding at a reasonable price. The house is located a bit outside town with only one other house next to it, as well as an empty lot. Shortly after moving in, an older guy came knocking on my door. He told me he was the other bidder and the owner of the empty property, and he only wanted my house in order to tear it down and make more space for his friends' RVs. He finished by essentially saying, "Enjoy your pile of junk." Since then, he has spent most of the summers in a lawn chair next to his RV on the empty property, with a clear view up my driveway and shooting me dirty looks every time I walked or drove by. Now, as I said, the house is a project, and I've made many improvements over the years as time and money has allowed. There is always something that needs doing on the house, and I'm also the designated mechanic for friends and family. There is usually a car or two getting repaired in my garage. This means lots of noisy tools. I've made sure to always start some kind of project when I see him sit down in his chair. This has gone on for a few summers now. He gives me dirty looks, I make noise. Only on reasonable hours, though. I don't do anything he can reasonably complain about. Today I continued on my bedroom remodeling, and it seems my circular saw finally broke him. He turned his RV around and put the chair in the opposite direction, where there is an actual view as compared to my driveway. I see this as a total victory. The next one is a malicious compliance story. Back in high school during my freshman year, I was on the football team. For my high school, if you were on the football team, you were required to have one weightlifting class, fall semester, per year, since the weightlifting coach was the football coach, and he could put you on a specialized training separate from the other students in the class. I normally train with one of my DE defensive end buddies, since we lifted relatively close to each other, so most workouts we wouldn't have to change the weights after each set, and we could take a reasonable break between sets. One guy on the team, a backup CB, cornerback, was usually way too cocky for his own good, always trying to show up his teammates. It's also important to note that he was about 50 pounds lighter than us and didn't do hardly any lifting. One day, me and DE were going for our 1-rep max squats. I think at the time we had about 255 on the bar. CB walked over with a smug look on his face that had "I'm better than you" written all over it. He told us that it looked easy and he could lift it no sweat. We told him it's definitely heavier than anything we've seen him lift. His confidence didn't falter though. He doubled down on his stance. Then he says to let him get one in. I look to DD looks at me. "Okay, fine, go ahead. Do you want spotters?" "Nah, this is easy. I don't need your help." I look at DE. DE looks at me. We took a step back and watched. To his credit, he was at least able to get it up off the hooks and onto his shoulders. His legs were shaking though. He clearly was struggling, but he very clearly said he could do it and he didn't want any help, so we didn't help him. CB squat and didn't get back up. If there weren't guards to save him, he definitely would have been stuck there for a bit because DE and I were fully ready to not help him at all. CB walked away embarrassed. And Coach, who was apparently behind us when this whole thing happened, just laughed and told us, while funny, to not do that again. Coach referenced that moment several times during the season, and thankfully CB was a good sport about it all. We were cool for the rest of the season. The next one is an Entitled People story. I know the title sounds weird, but hear me out. Okay. This event took place before the pandemic. I had worked at this job at least 6 years before I finally left its toxic environment. Yet I got along with just about all of my co-workers. I also, won't lie, live with my mom, which I will only say this is because of a couple things. My stepdad passed away from lung cancer in 2018, having passed 7 months after he was diagnosed. In 2019, she and I got the house we currently live in. Now, when this event took place, I worked nights at my job at the time. I would normally be home around 6 a.m. due to not driving at the time, and it was too cold for me to use my e-bike, so I would get rides from coworkers or bike depending on the weather. This is also Canada, so it can get cold. My asthma makes it hard to bike in cold weather. This was my day off, so I was hoping to just relax and just sleep. Though that wasn't meant to happen, it seemed as I was woken up by some sound above me. I live in the basement at my house, as it's a finished basement and my bedroom is under the living room of the house. But I just chalked it up to Mom watching some TV. So I get out of bed and go to grab my mom's bedding that was in the dryer. As I was getting up the stairs and open the door, that was when I see the dog. Another thing I should point out, the dog, Buddy, was my stepdad's dog, who, as he would call Buddy, was his furry son. This dog kept my mom sane when my stepdad passed away, and was always comforted by this dog in everything that came into her life. We had Buddy 3 years after my stepdad passed before he was diagnosed with lung cancer. Like my stepdad, we still miss this dog. Now, it was strange for me to see this dog in the kitchen, basement door leads into the kitchen, instead of the living room or my mom's room. He was practically glued to my mom's side. So, I asked, "What are you doing out here, Buddy?" He's just wagging his tail at me, so I go toward the living room door, and saw that the door was shut. Again, that confuses me, so I just mentally shrug and open the door. "Hey Mom, I'm bringing up your—" I stopped when I see a very familiar face on the couch with my mom. "Oh, OP, this is—" "I know who he is, Mom," I said. It wasn't clicking in for me as to what was going on, because, again, I just woke up from doing a close and didn't really get a hell of a lot of sleep. "How do you know him?" she asked. The guy's eyes were wide since I walked into the living room. "I work with his wife." Mom is in confusion and kind of leans back a little looking at the man, asking, "Your ex-wife?" She seemed a little skeptical. Before he could even answer, I said, "No, his current wife, insert co-worker's name." Mom, of course, is in shock, and again I don't clue in as to what was going on, just talking as I walk further into the living room with her bedding and set it on a chair. I pet Buddy and make sure he goes outside to do his thing, and then I go back to my living room in the basement. The guy was kicked out a while later, though beforehand he had begged my mom to tell me, not to tell his wife about this because she's possessive. So, for months, I kept my mouth shut. Though that wasn't the only thing she told me. She had told me that the reason why Buddy was kept out of the living room was because moment this guy, let's call him Jay, walked into the house, Buddy actually growled at him. This dog, who loves everyone he meets, growled at someone. That alone shocked me when my mom told me this. Well, that, and it turns out that Jay also knew my mom's cousin and her cousin's husband. They went to high school together. Only found that out when Mom mentioned that was part of their conversation before I came up the stairs. When Mom also told me that he was there because they met on Tinder, and that this was a date. Oh, how I wish that I knew sooner. I would have kicked his ass out the door myself, because if there was one thing I hated, it was cheaters. My mom had been cheated on before and she hates them, so she was thankful that I came up when I did. There is still more to this story. As I said, I had kept my mouth shut for months on not telling my co-worker. Let's call her Elle. Well, months after this date happened, I was working with her. As we worked, I had heard her saying that she was being kicked out of her townhouse. I was confused and asked what happened. Elle told some of us that Jay tried to overdose and she had managed to get help in time to save him, so she had pretty much saved his life. Yet, how does he repay her? By trying to get her kicked out of the house. So when I heard that, I'm just like, screw this, no repercussions. Then I told her everything that happened, how he met my mom, to him being at my house, to when I came up, everything. When I was done, she just stared at me, a mix of shock, as well as... Well, I'm not really sure what this other look was, but she looked like this had happened before, which she confirmed. Turns out Jay cheated on her throughout their entire marriage. They have 5 kids. Her oldest is at least 20s or 30s, I don't remember. Also, he was the possessive one, not Elle. Whenever they separated, he was always allowed to see other people, but not her, and made damn sure of that. Once she had everything I told her, she had finally been pushed because with what I told her, it seemed that it was far worse than what he's done in the past. Their marriage was just toxic from what I learned later on. Not just with destroying her property, such as her phone, but he hacked into her Facebook to make posts. I don't know all the details, but what I do know is that there is now a restraining order against him. He even tried to tear her down by saying that no man would want her because she was used and old. Mind you, she isn't old, she's still young and has a lot of life in her. Then told her that she's too old to get into a union job, but she proved him wrong on all accounts. Got herself a good man, got a good paying job now, and she even lost weight. Hell, she's doing a damn good job living her life right now. But there was one thing that I had asked her, after I had told her everything. Elle, you said I look just like my mom, right? I had asked. She said, yes, you do. I had posted pics of me with my mom Facebook for my mom's 50th birthday, and Elle had commented just how much my mom and I look alike. I'm her clone, to say the least, haha. Her husband had met me many times in the past because he would sometimes bring Elle coffee or bring her the debit card that she forgot. So, how is it that your husband didn't even notice how much I looked like my mom when he met her? I asked. Her words. I can't help but smile at the thought of such a thing. Because he's a ducking idiot. I laughed a little at that. Even their son, who also worked with us, told me that his dad isn't that smart, bright. So you can tell that it had to be true if his own wife, now ex-wife, and son tell me the same thing. When I had even told Elle how he knew my mom's cousin and her husband, Elle had told me that it was most likely that he would have tried to get lucky with her as well. Though that wasn't going to happen anyway, because my mom's cousin is still very much in love with her husband, high school sweethearts. So, this guy tried to get lucky, only for it to ruin his marriage. Karma in its finest. But I still wished I had said something to her sooner, I won't lie. That is my only regret with this, but I'm at least happy that she got out of that toxic marriage. Now, living her best life without that jackass. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.